Uzoma's eyes fluttered open, the early morning sunlight streaming through the small window of her one-bedroom apartment. She lay in bed for a moment, the weight of her responsibilities settling in like a familiar ache. As a single mother, she was no stranger to hard work and sacrifice. Her 3 children, Obi, Ofo, and Abah, depended on her for everything, and she was determined to give them the best life possible. As she got dressed and ready for the day, Uzoma's mind wandered to the long list of tasks ahead. She had to get the children to school, work multiple jobs to make ends meet, and still find time to cook dinner and help with their homework. It was a juggling act she had mastered over the years, but it didn't make it any easier. The children were her world, and she had given up so much for them. Their father had left before Abah was born, and Uzoma had been left to raise them on her own. She had never told them much about their father, partly because she didn't know what to say. The pain of his departure still lingered, and she didn't want to burden her children with her own emotional baggage. As she made breakfast for the children, Uzoma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Despite the challenges, she had managed to provide for her children and give them a good education. They were bright and curious, and she had no doubt they would make something of themselves one day. But as the children grew older, they began to ask more questions about their father. Uzoma's evasive answers only fueled their curiosity, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they started to piece together the truth. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she had to be prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. As she sent the children off to school, Uzoma felt a sense of trepidation. She knew that her children's questions would only become more insistent, and she would have to find a way to answer them without revealing too much. The weight of her secrets felt like a ticking time bomb, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. The day wore on, with Uzoma juggling her various responsibilities with her usual efficiency. But beneath the surface, she was seething with anxiety. She knew that her children's curiosity would eventually lead them to the truth, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. As the sun began to set, Uzoma sat down with her children to share a meal together. They chatted about their day, laughing and joking with each other. Uzoma smiled and nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew that her children's questions would only become more pressing, and she would have to find a way to answer them without compromising her own values and principles. The meal ended, and the children began to settle in for the night. Uzoma sat down beside them, feeling a sense of love and gratitude. She knew that she had done her best to provide for them, and she was proud of the people they were becoming. But as she looked into their eyes, she saw a glimmer of curiosity that made her heart skip a beat. She knew that her children's questions would only become more insistent, and she would have to find a way to answer them without revealing too much. As the night wore on, Uzoma couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. She knew that her children's curiosity would eventually lead them to the truth, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. But for now, she pushed the thought aside and focused on the present moment, cherishing the time she had with her children. As the days went by, Obi, Ofo, and Abah's curiosity about their father only grew stronger. They would often sneak glances at their mother's old photographs, trying to piece together the story of their family's past. Uzoma, sensing their interest, tried to deflect their questions, but the children were determined to uncover the truth. One day, while exploring their mother's old trunk in the attic, Obi stumbled upon a faded letter addressed to their mother. The letter was worn and torn, but Obi's eyes widened as he read the words. It was from their father, and it revealed a shocking truth: he was not who they thought he was. Obi's heart racing, he showed the letter to his siblings. Together, they pored over the words, their minds reeling with questions. Why had their father lied to them? Why had their mother kept the truth from them? As they dug deeper, they discovered that their father was a wealthy businessman with a reputation for ruthlessness. He had multiple families and was known for his cunning and ambition. The children were stunned, feeling like their whole world had been turned upside down. Uzoma, sensing her children's distress, tried to reassure them. She explained that she had made the decision to keep their father's identity a secret to protect them from the pain and complexity of the situation. But the children were no longer satisfied with her explanations. They demanded to know more about their father and why he had abandoned them. The revelation sparked a mix of emotions in the children: anger, sadness, and confusion. They felt betrayed by their father's lies and their mother's secrecy. As they navigated this complex web of family secrets and lies, they began to question everything they thought they knew about themselves and their place in the world. As the days passed, the children's relationships with each other and their mother began to change. They became more withdrawn and introspective, struggling to come to terms with the shocking truth about their father. Uzoma, sensing their emotional turmoil, tried to be supportive, but she knew that she couldn't shield them from the pain forever. The family's dynamics were shifting, and the children were forced to confront the harsh realities of their father's betrayal. They began to wonder if they would ever be able to forgive him, or if their relationship with him would ever be the same again. The shocking truth had set off a chain reaction, and the consequences would be far-reaching. As the children grappled with their emotions, they started to develop different perspectives on their father's actions. Obi felt angry and resentful, Ofo was confused and torn, while Abah felt a deep sense of sadness. Their individual reactions would shape their relationships with each other and their parents in ways they could hardly imagine. The discovery of their father's true identity had opened up a Pandora's box, releasing a torrent of emotions and questions. The children were forced to navigate this complex and painful reality, and their journey would take them to places they never thought they would go. As the children struggled to come to terms with the shocking truth about their father, they began to realize that their entire lives had been built on a foundation of secrets and lies. They felt like they were living in a world that was not their own, a world that had been constructed by their parents' decisions and actions. Obi, Ofo, and Abah started to question everything they thought they knew about their family and themselves. They wondered if their mother's sacrifices had been worth it, or if she had been foolish to think that she could provide for them on her own. They felt like they were caught in a web of deceit, and they didn't know how to escape. As they navigated this complex and painful reality, the children began to turn on each other. Obi, who had always been the most responsible and serious of the siblings, became increasingly withdrawn and angry. Ofo, who had always been the most laid-back and easygoing, started to question his own identity and purpose. Abah, who had always been the most sensitive and emotional, felt like she was losing her sense of self. Uzoma, sensing her children's distress, tried to intervene. She explained that she had made the decision to keep their father's identity a secret to protect them from the pain and complexity of the situation. But the children were no longer satisfied with her explanations. They demanded to know more about their father and why he had abandoned them. As the family dynamics continued to shift, the children began to realize that they were not just fighting about their father's identity, but also about their own identities and relationships with each other. They were struggling to come to terms with the fact that their family was not what they thought it was, and that they might have to redefine what family meant to them. The tension between the family members continued to build, and it seemed like the secrets and lies were tearing them apart. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of tenderness and understanding. Uzoma would look at her children and see the pain and confusion in their eyes, and she would feel a deep sense of regret. She knew that she had made mistakes, and she wanted to make it right. As the family struggled to navigate this complex and painful reality, they began to realize that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the love and support that had always been the foundation of their family. But they also knew that they had to confront the truth about their father's identity and the secrets that had been kept from them. The journey ahead would be difficult, but the family was determined to face it together. They knew that they would have to walk through their emotions and come to terms with the past, but they were willing to do whatever it took to heal and move forward. As they sat together in their small apartment, the tension between them was palpable. But there was also a sense of determination and resolve. They knew that they would get through this together, as a family. And as they looked at each other, they knew that they would always be there for each other, no matter what. The family's journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew that they would have to confront the truth about their father's identity and the secrets that had been kept from them. But they were determined to do it together, as a family. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Uzoma's children had been demanding answers about their father's identity and the secrets that had been kept from them. Uzoma knew that she couldn't avoid the truth any longer. She took a deep breath and sat down with her children, ready to confront the past and answer their questions. The room was filled with tension as Uzoma began to tell her story. She spoke of how she had met their father, a charming and charismatic man who had swept her off her feet. She spoke of how they had fallen in love and had planned to build a life together. But she also spoke of how he had abandoned her when she was pregnant with Abah, leaving her to raise their children on her own. As Uzoma spoke, her children listened with rapt attention. They had never heard their mother's story before, and they were fascinated by the glimpse into her past. They saw the pain and vulnerability in her eyes, and they began to understand the sacrifices she had made for them. But as Uzoma's story unfolded, the children's emotions began to shift. They felt a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. They didn't know how to process the information, and they didn't know how to forgive their father for his betrayal. Uzoma's children demanded to know why she had kept their father's identity a secret for so long. Uzoma explained that she had been trying to protect them from the pain and complexity of the situation. But the children were no longer satisfied with her explanations. They wanted to know why she had lied to them, and why she had kept the truth from them for so long. The conversation was intense and emotional, with both sides expressing their feelings and concerns. Uzoma's children were struggling to come to terms with the truth about their father, and Uzoma was struggling to justify her decisions. But as they talked, they began to understand each other's perspectives, and they started to heal. As the conversation came to a close, Uzoma's children looked at her with newfound understanding and empathy. They saw the pain and vulnerability in her eyes, and they knew that she had done what she thought was best for them. They forgave her for keeping the truth from them, and they began to walk towards healing and moving forward. But just as it seemed like the family was starting to heal, a new challenge emerged. Their father, the man who had abandoned them years ago, suddenly reappeared. He wanted to reconnect with his children and make amends for his past mistakes. Uzoma's children were torn, unsure of what to do. Should they forgive their father and give him a second chance, or should they reject him and move on with their lives? The family was faced with a difficult decision, one that would change the course of their lives forever. Would they be able to forgive and move forward, or would the past continue to haunt them? The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear: the family's journey was far from over. The family's decision about whether to forgive their father and give him a second chance was a difficult one. Uzoma's children were torn, unsure of what to do. They had grown up without their father, and they had learned to rely on each other and their mother for support. As they deliberated, Uzoma's children thought about the past and the pain their father had caused. They remembered the struggles they had faced, the sacrifices their mother had made, and the times they had felt abandoned and unloved. But they also thought about the present and the opportunity for forgiveness and redemption. In the end, they decided to meet with their father and hear him out. They wanted to understand why he had abandoned them and why he wanted to reconnect now. Uzoma's children were cautious, but they were also open to the possibility of forgiveness and healing. The meeting with their father was emotional and intense. He apologized for his past mistakes and explained that he had been struggling with his own demands. He had been selfish and immature, and he had not realized the impact his actions would have on his family. Uzoma's children listened to their father's words, and they began to see him in a new light. They realized that he was not the monster they had imagined, but a flawed and imperfect person who was trying to make amends. As they talked, Uzoma's children began to forgive their father.